Hello, my name is Jeremy and I have a confession to make. It's been 4 months since I've been to the barber's. As a result, my hair is badly out of control and it's weighing heavily on my mind. Each day gets bushier and bushier. I am now sporting my own busby and it's getting so tall that if I dyed it blue, I could do a passable impersonation of Marge Simpson. My lad is in the same boat. With his advancing fringe, I haven't seen his eyes for weeks, and his nose is fast disappearing. Even the dog is so shaggy, I'm not sure which end to feed her. This may be a sign of how lockdown is affecting me, but I find myself wondering, what does the Bible say about hair? And I thought there may be a few of you out there who would wish to know what I've found. Throughout the Bible, hair gets quite a lot of mentions, and they generally fall into 4 categories. By far the biggest category is where hair is used purely to describe something. So, for example, we're told people wear coats made of goat's hair, or we're told Esau was a hairy man, and we're told that Mary wiped Jesus' feet using her hair. Interestingly, in the Song of Songs, the man describes his beloved's hair as like a flock of goats descending from Gilead, which again I think is a pretty good description of my hair at the moment. The second area where hair is used is to decide whether a skin condition renders somebody clean or unclean. That, I have to say, is quite gruesome reading and not something I want to dwell on here. Thirdly, it's mentioned in connection with people who make vows to God, whether they should cut their hair or not, and if they do cut their hair, what they should do with it. The story of Samson, probably the most famous hairy person in the Bible, obviously falls into that category. But then finally, and maybe most interestingly to us, there are some verses about hair management. Kicking off with Isaiah 3, this describes the day of the Lord as being a day where instead of fragrance there will be stench, instead of fine clothing, sackcloth, and instead of well-dressed hair, baldness. So in that, the Bible seems to be implying that baldness is a bad thing. Contrawise though, when Absalom hangs himself because his flowing locks get tangled in tree branches, the Bible seems to be condemning long hair too. In terms of specific references to hairdressing, Leviticus 19 says we're told not to cut the hair on the sides of our heads. Now that is a command I am currently complying with now, and is the reason why many Jews have long side tassels down past their ears. A couple of chapters later, we're told priests mustn't let their hair become unkempt, something I'm sure Jim is well aware of. However, hairdressing advice is not confined to the Old Testament alone. In 1 Corinthians, Paul says if a man has long hair, it is a disgrace to him, but if a woman has long hair, it is to her glory. You women can therefore look at yourselves in the morning, and as your hair gets longer and longer and longer, day by day, you can remember that verse and think, I am getting more glorious. However, it got me wondering about us men. Are we, with our long hair, being unbiblical? In the epistles, Paul and his fellow writers give countless comments about how we should live our Christian life. These range from clear, strong, bold directions like don't do this or don't do that, to more inferred advice such as the verse that I've been talking about. And again, it covers family life, public life, and life in the Christian community. And so, really, the nub of my thought today is how should we treat these instructions and this advice? Should we obey them all to the letter? And if not, which ones can we ignore and which should we stick with? And how should we decide between the two? Well, sadly, I'm not going to give you an answer, because it's a very complicated subject that covers a phenomenally wide spectrum of issues. And I think actually the answer may well be different for each one of us. But maybe I can outline some thoughts or questions you can reflect on. when you're pondering such advice? Firstly, my starting point is that Jesus said the most important commands were to love God with all our hearts and to love our neighbours as ourselves. No mention of hair there then, or indeed much else. However, clearly our lives should be focused around fulfilling those two commands. And so when we think of the commands and instructions in the epistles, we must ask ourselves if it achieves that purpose. Does this particular advice help us to love God with all our hearts and love our neighbours as ourselves? Clearly, for example, avoiding, say, adultery, profanity and drunkenness, all condemned by Paul, would help us in that respect. Would having short hair help us? Secondly, we're told not to be legalistic. If long hair was to be a big issue, then there is a minefield of legalism there. How long should it be? Who defines that? What should the length be at the front, the sides, the back? You could get tied up hopelessly in knots. Thirdly, whilst the epistles contain so much that is directly relevant to us, they were nonetheless written in a specific culture at a specific time for a specific purpose. And so that may affect how the advice should be interpreted. And of course, finally, we have a just God who is a forgiving one. He understands that the barbers, for example, aren't open at the moment. And if we feel we have got it wrong, if we feel we have stepped over a mark, and if we repent, he wants to forgive us. So I'll leave it up to you as to whether a man with long hair is unbiblical. As for me, I've come to accept that my hair today will not be gone tomorrow. And so I wait until lockdown is ended or someone invites barber's scissors with telescopic handles. Mind you, I'm going to keep an eye on Jim's hair from now on. Amen.